Hello everyone. This is the 11th part of the story Game of Thrones, the Prideful one. Chapter 54. Illyrio welcomed me to Pentos with open arms and fearful eyes. Just as I expected, he still remembered our little personal chat, to some degree. I knew he was still double playing, but for now he would be allowed to live. He still had some use. My sources have gathered that Aegon is gathering allies, but struggling to keep up with me. All he had for the moment was Jon Cunnington, Varys and Illyrio on his side. His location was still unknown for me, as all the information I had gathered about him came from Varys and Illyrio during their secret exchanges, and both had been very careful not to say where he was, even during their little chats. Perhaps Varys was catching on with me, or they were really secretive to keep the so-called rightful king safe. I had no hard feelings for Aegon. In fact, I would give the option to just surrender and take Dragonstone, and keep the Targaryen bloodline, but I knew he would not take that offer. After all, any man with a possible claim for power would fight to the death to claim it. He would fight me even if he knew it was a lost cause. But in the end, wasting time thinking of him was utterly pointless. He was the least of my concerns, a man without an army. Though I had to admit his existence puzzled me. Before I discovered how deep Varys' plots reached and heard of him, I had completely ignored his existence. I remember vaguely reading about him in the second book, and how they couldn't really confirm he was who he said he was. I suppose burning him would prove if his dragon heritage was what he said it was and solve the mystery. I have provided your men with all the things you requested, Illyrio smiled, bringing back to the real world outside my head. Oh, as diligent as ever, I nodded. Food and medical supplies were two of the few things I really needed to ensure my army stayed healthy and powerful. Ignoring Illyrio the rest of the way, I walked to the Bay of Pentos with my army behind. My blood riders were glaring at anyone that even dared to look at me, but while the thought of them being protective was nice and all, in reality this was how Dothraki acted to strangers. Neltharion was undercover inside my fur jacket, sleeping soundly around my covered neck. I was waiting for the perfect moment to show him off to Illyrio and see his expression of suffering when he realizes the dragon eggs he sold me hatched. It would be fantastic to experience his dismay. What can I say? I have no sympathy for the Magister. For the king! A man shouted, jumping from behind, trying to stab me with a knife dripping something. I didn't have to be a genius to know it was poison. Everything around me slowed down as I smiled. It has been quite a while since I had such a blatant assassination attempt, but before I can even reach my blade and kill the poor man that was highly misinformed of how hard this would be, my blood rider cut his head with his arak. Such a weak man does not deserve to stain the blade of our call, my blood rider said, spitting on the corpse of the assassin. I smiled at him. While I wanted to deal with the attempt myself, it was also nice to see I had competent men under my banner. Amazing work, with an impressive clean cut. I smiled as I looked at Illyrio, who at this point was sweating his own weight per second. Did he have something to do with this? Hardly. Varys would stage something with more brain behind it. This was not Varys' craft, ergo Illyrio had nothing to do with this, but he thought I thought he had, so fear was filling his very core. It's all right, Illyrio, I smiled, deciding to mess with him another time. The assassin is death. No need to be afraid. With that I returned with my walk, leaving the corpse of the assassin to rot in the market as I continued to ignore Illyrio, as I chuckled inwardly at his earlier reaction. Tyrion Lannister point of view. The throne seemed to be 50% off. With everyone going for it, it was all I could think of. Stannis Baratheon, Renly Baratheon, Ronard Mormont, all that was left was for the horse to try and claim the throne. We had so many enemies that if father somehow pulled the wind out of his gold-shitting ass it would surprise me, but in all fairness, if someone could do impossible things through questionable means was father. The house still eluded me though, but for some reason father wanted me to be the new master of coin, discarding Peter Baelish of his positions. Quoting father, the man was as trusty as knife through the heart and he was needed elsewhere, outside where he could not damage more of the throne. And because of that, I was solving unsolvable economical problems that really put into perspective who the hell chooses the people in this small council. Oh yeah, the last king. I suppose that answers a lot. We were in debt with the Iron Bank by an absurdly large amount, and with our enemies on the other side of the sea, we were most likely to pay our dues by their sword. After all, the Iron Bank was famous for financing the enemies of those who have not paid them. And we have not paid them. But things were starting to improve a bit. Euron Greyjoy had come to talk to me, well, my father, about an alliance. He wanted in exchange of his help that we helped him take the Iron Islands, and here I was sealing our alliance, We needed all the allies we could gather. So do we have a deal, imp? Euron smiled, stretching up his hand. We do, I smiled, taking his hand. Euron Greyjoy point of view. Making a deal with the Lannisters to take back what is mine and more was something I decided on the go. If things went bad for the Lannisters, I would just bail out and leave them hanging, so it was a win-win for me, nothing to lose, much to gain. Just how I like it. And if I get to fuck the queen along the way, that would be just a bonus, the cherry on the top. But then again, how many queens were there? I had a lot to fuck. Cersei Lannister, Marjorie Tyrell and, of course, the rare delicacy of Daenerys Targaryen. Maybe after all of this ends and their respective men or protector are dead, I can show them a cock worthy of a crown, my own whorehouse with nothing but queens. I like the sound of that. I wonder if the little dragoness will like the taste of a kraken better. I smiled, as I imagined her little white-colored head between my legs choking on my cock. Well, if she doesn't, I can always dip my cock on his blood so she can taste her husband and me. Unbeknownst to him, a raven with an eye patch and a black leather robe was watching him, and listening to his suicidal talk. This motherfucker be dead and he doesn't even know it. Stannis Baratheon point of view. Melisandre said I was the chosen one, the one that would bring the realm together, and yet all I had was opposition. The North had yet to allied with me, my own foolish brother was rising against me, and the rising minor lord of the Bear Islands was also going for the throne. But my Red Witch was right, there were fakes, betrayers. The God of Light had assured me that the throne would be mine, and that they were nothing but shadows I had to cast away to prove I was worthy of his blessing. And I was, because I was the rightful king of the 7 kingdoms, and I would have my throne, for I was the prince that was promised. Victory was written in my destiny, the fire had spoken of my victory before. Nothing will stop me, I stated as a matter of fact. Nothing will, my king. Melisandre nodded in approval. The fire has shown me of your victory, all those fakes will fall to your mighty feet. Chapter 55. The sound of one of my men knocking at my door woke me up. It probably meant 2 things: either we were close or someone was stupid enough to attack us in the sea. So with curiosity I hastily dressed up as I scrambled over to the deck to confirm which one was it, happy for either of the 2. My king, we are 2 hours away from the coast close to Lys, the captain of my ship stated, pointing with his finger to the map in front of him. Very well, I nodded. It seemed one of my suspicions was right, and I would be reunited with Daenerys soon. It has been almost a month since I last saw her. She must have that beautiful baby bum bigger than when I left her. My first priority was getting a base in Essos, and Lys would suffice for many purposes. It was on the sea, so it was easily protectable, and it was located close to the Pentos, so travel would be a breeze. But the one reason that moved me to get this city as fast as I could was that I didn't really know how much time Daenerys would need to recover. After childbirth, she would be having twins and the medical state of this world was quite lacking, but I would give her all the time she needed on a protected environment. And Lys was the perfect place for that. A mercantile city, built on a very fertile island that was very good for agriculture and that at one point was considered a tropical paradise by old Valyrian dragonlords. This beautiful sunny island would serve as the safe haven I was looking for my wife and kid. Quite poetic that one of the latest dragon ladies is coming back to the island. But things were easier said than done, and conquering may or may not present its challenges. My ravens had said Lys is protected by high walls and hired cells words, both navy and land. The navy would be a piece of cake to destroy, but I had yet to see if their army would prove a bigger challenge. After all, numbers don't always win wars. But I would find a way, victory would be mine, one way or another. But in many aspects it was the right choice. Conquering Lys would make me infinitely richer than I was before. Because, politically speaking, the city was dominated by wealth rather than by birth, so in short, there were no lords, just rich merchants with tons of gold begging to be mine. Apparently, Lys is a place where trade is considered a profession more honorable than being a knight. But that wasn't all the city was known for. They were renowned in the world for their pleasure gardens and temples dedicated to pleasure, that are said to have the best whores in the known world. I already knew where my men would spend their gold after the conquer. Let me know once the land is in sight, I told my men, leaving to my quarters inside the ship. As I walked to my room I pondered about how Viserys would react to the dragons, and everything. He was still alive. I had yet to see him, but he was on one of the ships. Still in his cell, eating whatever my men decide to give him. I wonder if Daenerys will kill him, I chuckled. Daenerys Targaryen point of view. I had moved the army to the coast, where we would set camp while we waited for Ronard to arrive with the ships. Regal and Crow had been anxious since Ronard wasn't close. They really missed their dad. He was the one that hatched them. I was starting to actually feel the pregnancy affecting me. My baby bum oven, as Ronard calls it, had grown a lot these past few days. The twins had decided to expand their poor mother and see how bendy her skin and belly were. But even with all this, I can't help but love my little chimeras, as Ronard calls them. Half bears, half dragons. Whatever they would be, it would be unique and awesome. I just knew it. My Khaleesi, Ronard's father, Jorah Mormont, entered my tent, kneeling, not daring to look at my eyes. Ronard had left quite the impression on him, as he should. We can't forgive those who wrong us. But we can make them pay. What do you want? I questioned the disgusting leech, coldly. I want to redeem myself, for what I did in the past. Jorah took a deep breath. I want to offer my blade to be your knight. I want to be your shield should your life ever need one. I want to be of some use to my grandchildren. His grandchildren? He lost that right and privilege the moment they left my husband alone, in a broken kingdom where anarchy and betrayal rule, and the only way to survive is being the bigger monster. Your life is where is needed, so don't think so highly of yourself, I said, while Rhaegar and Crow hissed at him as if agreeing with me. You are but a stain on my husband's history, and stains can be removed, so to use that brain of yours and remind your place. By this point, ravens has entered my tent, many of them, all glaring at Jorah, as if awaiting my command to attack. Next time you disobey your king's orders, and come and talk to me, I will deliver my husband your head on a silver platter. Is that clear? Crystal, my queen. Ned Stark point of view. My family was on their way to pick me up. Well, Cat was. My son was holding the army together, and my daughters were in Winterfell alongside Bran and Rickon, safe and protected as they should be. I couldn't wait to hold my son and hug him. I couldn't wait to kiss my wife, and most of all, I couldn't wait to go back to Winterfell and never come back south again. Cat was right. Starks don't do well in the south. The memories of our walks together seemed so far from reality. I wasn't ready to die and leave my family behind. Lord Stark, Hoster Tully said, snapping me back to the waking world. The man was making an effort not to look weak. He was deadly sick and bedridden for the most part, but wanted to die like a man, on his feet. I know it's not ice, but you will need a new sword, he said. His servant handed me a fine long sword. It's not Valyrian steel, but is good enough. The sword was a masterpiece. It could be seen that it was magnificently crafted by a highly skilled blacksmith. It was not as unique as ice, but it would certainly do the trick when in battle. Whoever made this was very good. You didn't have to do this, I smiled, admiring the blade. Use it until you get your blade back, Hoster chuckled. That I will, I nodded. Ice would come back to our family, one way or the other. Catelyn Stark point of view. Ned was alive and was staying with my father in Riverrun. The gods were smiling at me. They had heard my prayers and helped my husband. Ned said it was thanks to Ronard that he escaped, that by his hand he was able to survive. But I could see beyond that. Ronard was trying to manipulate Ned into servitude. I wasn't going to let him. That treacherous rat would not take advantage of Ned anymore. Stannis would make sure of it, once Ned pledged his loyalty to him. Let's see how well you do, little bear, I smiled triumphantly. No matter what he was planning, I would always be one step ahead of him. For my family, I would stop him. Okay, this bitch is dumb. Her IQ must be negative. This motherfucker needs some books and corn. Somebody help this bitch increase her brain power. Unbeknownst to her, a raven with an eye patch and a black robe was trying hard to calculate her IQ. Robb Stark point of view. Father was safe, and the one responsible for it was Ronard. Had he foreseen this? Just how far ahead he had seen this game played out? Like Mother said, he was dangerous, but after this, I doubted he was for us. He had rescued Father knowing full well that Father would most likely support Stannis. He had done something for us, we as a whole would never be able to repay. He had united our family, our pack. But Mother was paranoid, saying he was trying to manipulate us, to use us. At this point, I was almost sure her ideas and opinions of him were biased on her one-sided hate she had for him. Because I refuse to believe now that he is our enemy and hates us. He had done what I couldn't. I wonder why Mother hates him so much, I sighed. At first I thought it was for what he did to Theon, but she never liked him, at least not that much to warrant such profound hate. Chapter 56. Daenerys, as I expected, was at the coast, Waiting with the army to enter the ship, she was a tad bigger, her belly ever growing. With a simple glance, I could tell I had a month or two before she was due. So I had to control that fucking island before that happened. "We are sailing to Lys tomorrow, right?" Daenerys inquired, sitting on a lounge silver coach I had bought. They said it was super comfortable. Yes, I nodded, as I smiled seeing how dashing she looked. Daenerys smiled for a moment as she touched her belly, as she gazed into my eyes. "We will win, I feel it." Was there ever any doubt? I smirked at her with a hint of overconfidence. "No, there wasn't," Daenerys giggled. "Viserys is here, you know," I sighed, not really knowing what to do with him. Setting him free was not an option, and death was something I wanted Daenerys to choose for him. Daenerys looked at me for a second as if contemplating what to do with her brother. She now had an even bigger reason to deal with him. There is no love like motherly love. If something can move mountains, is that unyielding love a mother feels for her children. Not all of them feel this, but Daenerys was that type of woman, so all Viserys had to do was say the wrong words and he would be dead. "I'll deal with him later," Daenerys said with a cold tone, with emotionless eyes, giving me all the information I needed. She had no feelings for him at all anymore. She didn't feel powerless. She knew she was the dragon and he was a fake. "Do whatever you want, but don't set him free. He steps out of his prison and stays alive, and I'll personally have him skinned." While I trusted she would not, so that I had to let her know my thoughts on the matter, I had stationed various snakes around and ravens. Should he try and flee, they would kill him in a matter of seconds. Daenerys actually smiled at that. "I would never. He plotted to have you killed and wanted to sell me as a common whore. He would spend the rest of his days in prison, or maybe if I feel generous I will kill him." Damn, since when she becomes so cold-blooded and badass? She is so warm and girly with me, but the moment we talk about anything else she goes full Maleficent. I am both intrigued and aroused by this behavior. "My queen is breathing fire," I smiled. Daenerys stood up and grabbed my hands, putting one on her belly, and the other in my heart. "I have things I would gladly die for now. You and my babies are the only ones I care. For what I care, the world can burn." "I agree," I smiled, giving her a soft peck on the lips. "Do you think they know?" Daenerys inquired after our kiss, making me smile. They did know. Someone had deduced my intentions and wanted to fuck with them, but once again, they used the now most unreliable method of communication, ravens, and I knew that their magister was preparing for me. They do, but his changes nothing. If a hanged man knows he is going to be hanged, changes nothing. Next day, after setting the security detail for Daenerys, that consisted in ravens, horses, several snakes hiding in every corner of her room, and her personal guard that had over 1,000 men, we sailed to Lys, my 150 ships loaded with men ready to fight and die for me. Our estimated time of arrival was approximately 1 day. The commander of my fleet said we would arrive in a day or so, if we didn't encounter their navy on the way. And we would not. Why? Krakens. Their navy was a non-existent concern for me. After all, I had ordered my Krakens to start destroying their ships, eliminating their navy before we even arrived at Lys, rendering Lys's naval defenses useless. While seeing my men fight in the sea would be intriguing, I didn't want to risk Daenerys' ship being crushed or something, and I also wanted all my men alive and fully rested for the siege that was coming. Depending on how well defended the city was, it could take from weeks to months to bring them to their knees, but I didn't have the luxury of that. Lys would fall, and it would fall fast. Pateki Malor, Magister of Lys, point of view. I had received a message from Pentos that a self-proclaimed king and conqueror was coming our way. What a stupid little child, my sources had confirmed he was indeed sailing to Lys. And that would arrive, but like many others he would fail, his army would shatter, his power would vanish, and his men would be sold as slaves in my market, and after that I would personally train his wife to be a whore worthy of working in one of my pleasure gardens. Kids have a taste for victory and suddenly feel invincible, I laughed, as one of my naked whores served me more wine. Our navy is highly accustomed to Sea of Lys. No matter how big his army is, it can't do anything if it doesn't land, one of my advisors agreed. I can't wait to see if it's true that pure Valyrian pussy tastes like fire, I laughed, but a loud sound startled me, followed by the screams of terror. What was going on outside my beach tower? Standing up my chair and walking as fast as I could to the window to see what was happening, I glanced outside my tower, and what I saw made me shiver. This shouldn't be happening. Not now. A kraken, what is a beast so rare doing here? We have no krakens close to Lys, they are never around this area. What could have possibly made this terrible scenario? That kraken would dwindle our ships, but not enough to destroy our navy. My lord loom there. My advisor pointed to another direction. Another kraken, too, maybe we could handle. My lord! My advisor cried in panic, pointing to another direction, where the same thing was happening. More krakens, destroying our ships one by one. They were targeting them, our navy was done for. There was nothing we could do to stop such creatures. All I could do was watch in terror how these creatures destroyed my defenses as if they were helping the brat coming up. Destiny was not smiling upon me. Ned Stark point of view. I was anxiously waiting for my wife's carriage as I saw it descend from the road. I would be soon reunited with her, and the rest of my family, my pack. It almost felt as if the war wasn't going on, and we were at peace. As I pondered over this stupid ideas, deep within my thoughts, the carriage stops, and like an arrow Cat gets out and comes running at my arms. Ned! Cat cried, touching my face as if she didn't believe it. I'm back, I smiled, not resisting the urge anymore to kiss her. It was as if I was dying of thirst and her embrace was my only salvation. Things like this were never my forte, but I was happy with the thought she knew that I loved her, and needed her. I never lost hope the gods would help you, Cat said between sobs. I never stopped praying for you. I smiled, hugging her tightly. We are together at last. Our embrace lasted for about 5 minutes before we broke it off. By this point Cat had calmed down and started to explain to me in detail how the war was going. She also went into detail to explain how Ronard planned to use me. I knew she didn't think much of the lad, but this is troubling. Cat, stop, I said. She was getting on my nerves. I loved her, but he had saved me. He deserved at least some respect. I would not let other bad mouth someone that has only done good to our family. We owe him a lot, more than he owe us. Stop this nonsense. We are Northerners. We don't dwell in plots like the Southerners. We are for the most part honorable, and the lad for me is honorable. We were the ones that broke our word first and paid a grave price for it. Cat glared at me, as if I had insulted her, but it had to be said. If it wasn't for Robert and my lack of spine to stop him, we would have Ronard aiding us right now, and Sansa would have a good husband. We had severed that ourselves, and we are the only ones to blame. You'll see, like I told not to come to King's Landing because you would probably end up dead, and it ended up being almost true. You'll see how honorable that kid can be, Cat said with a huff, leaving to speak with her father. Not even an hour together and we already fought, I sighed. Chapter 57. It was finally here. We had arrived at Lys with no complications, just as I expected. Now was where the war started. My men were prepared for what is to come. I had told them there were only 2 rules: no raping and no killing kids. Most of the last year has been spent increasing my military strength to prepare for the challenges ahead. This was my first challenge. My first conquest as the King of the 7 Kingdoms, the King of Essos. At the coast, we found nothing but a desolated area that made unloading and setting the camp walk long and silent. The Magister probably opted to play on the defense without his navy. He didn't have many options after all. But so much silent could mean they were trying to ambush me, so with that in mind, I sent a few ravens to scout the area, and some to investigate what the Magister was doing right now. If they had a militia of 2,000 Sellswords, it would a lot, and against my army of 80,000 of Dothraki, plus what I had from the 7 Kingdoms. Made his options very limited. He can't face me head-on, so trying to starve me out here the best option. Quite crafty considering he is nothing but a merchant, but I suppose I must give credit where it's due. It takes our men roughly 8 hours to set the camp, starting with my tent so that my wife could rest. The rest of the day was spent on unloading our supplies from the ships, weapons, food, medical equipment, and more, but it was fairly simple to do it without opposition. I originally expected to face some type of problem once we arrived at the tropical island, but I'm glad I was wrong with that. I can relax at the thought nothing will happen to Dany, not even by mistake. A few hours after setting the camp, my ravens flew back to their posts with updates, and things were mostly like I expected them to be. The Magister had indeed planned a defensive strategy, but not for the entirety of Lys. He had moved the entire company of Sellswords he had hired to his castle and had locked himself there with some other nobles. With all the food he was able to move and raid from the people of Lys, his plan. To stall me for as long as possible, while he contacted Braavos for help. Little did he know his ravens had betrayed him and no messages would arrive at Braavos, ever. Little did he know, he made this conquest massively easier. He had left out at their own risk all the citizens of Lys, from slaves to whore, to fend for themselves against my army. All I had to do was show a bit of generosity. After all, if you feed a stray dog, he's going to stay. Help someone in need and you will have their undying devotion. Is politics 101? Seriously, who picks these guys to rule? But not only he had screwed up with his people practically handing them to me on a silver platter, but he had also made my hunt easier, because thanks to him, all my enemies in this island were now in one single place. A target begging to be burned. How delightful, I smirked, very happy with the information I had been given. But that wasn't all the information my ravens were able to gather for me. Apparently, the Magister originally pretended to slave my people and make my wife a queen. His personal whore. With that insightful new information at hand, I let my men know the situation, sending, as you would say, political ambassadors around the island, with each one a small army of 5,000 soldiers to back them up, with simple one mission: to tell all the citizens that would not harm, that our target was the Magister, and that if they bowed the knee, we would ensure that the Magister paid for his crimes against them. As for me, I had an entirely different mission, on a completely different tone. I was not in the mood for peace. Quite frankly, what I wanted right now was to boil the Magister alive for his hubris of thinking that he would ever touch Daenerys, for I would make sure he begged with all his might for the sweet and kind release of death, and only then I would deliver his wretched soul into the fiery pits of hell. So with anger boiling within my soul and the unyielding desire of butchering a Magister, I rode with my Khalasar to his castle, ready to bring him in every down, no mercy. My beliefs were simple: in war, if they stand behind me I would give them protection, as I do with my men. If they stand beside me, they would get my respect. But if they stand against me, they would get no mercy. May the gods have mercy upon our enemies. I shouted, getting cheers of approval from my Khalasar, because we won't. Athvilagerer. War. My Khalasar chanted as we rode to the castle, each and every single one of them, ready to taint their blades with blood. Pateki Malor, Magister of Lys, point of view. The brat had arrived. His army was, as my source in Pentos had said, massively big, with over 80,000 men, Dothrakis, and Westerosi men, but mostly Dothraki. There was no way I could confront him with my 3,000 cells words. Our navy was our only defense. Without it, thanks to those Kraken, we were in a pretty bad situation, so I contacted Bravos. With their support this could be salvage, and we would destroy this threat. All I had to do was wait. And the lowly citizens of Lys would serve as sand for my watch. They would die for a bigger and better cause than themselves, to protect me, their Magister. Sir! One of my servants entered the room, sweating like a madman. Our scouts. They came back. The army is moving our way, they say, at least over 60,000 soldiers. How did he know where was my castle? There were several dozens in Lys. This castle is even my primary castle, and more importantly, why wasn't he laying waste to the city or focusing on controlling the citizens first? It mattered not. His army might be big but is useless if he can reach within my walls. I have more than enough food to survive a year feeding everyone here, and more if I just let others starve. Have the archers ready, I ordered, should they try to approach too much. Back to Ronard point of view. I had two plans for the siege this time around. After all, I was better prepared this time. Basically, I would set huge scaling ladders against the castle's outer walls for my soldiers to climb and gain access to the castle. However, this would leave my men vulnerable to arrows and other objects thrown at them from the battlements on the castle walls. That's where my ravens come in. They would attack the archers and help my men to reach the walls. But this was just plan A. Plan B was that another part of my army would ram the doors of the castle. If we could break down the castle gate, we would have free access to the castle. So with the large wooden logs I had brought, I would set my men to pound against the gate, and eventually until they destroyed the gate. I would set my men with both plans, and one way or the way, we would enter and lay waste on their men. Kill all the archers. I ordered my Raven squad, who immediately after left the formation, flying to the castle was to carry out their assignment diligently. Hiss. Neltharion hissed excitedly. Like always, he had refused to part ways with me. This would prove beneficial once he was fully grown. We'll be there soon. I patted his head, as I continued to gallop with my horse at full speed through the city of Lys, people cowering in fear, not even daring to move, and one can hardly blame them. Dothrakis were quite fearsome, and even more in massive numbers. Hiss. This time I felt anger within Neltharion, as if, like me, he wanted retribution with the Magister. Was he feeling my feelings? Don't worry, he will burn. I smiled with a dark undertone, as I pondered, could Neltharion breath fire already? Can you set him on fire? I knew asking this was maybe a tad complicated for a newborn, but they do grow up fast. In response, Neltharion blew a bit of fire, doing his maximum effort to keep it up, the fire being at much like 2 lighters. This development seemed to depress Neltharion, who sulked under my jacket. Hey buddy, don't worry, you'll be soon burning like a massive flamethrower. Besides, with a bit of oil, that fire you have will work. Hiss. Neltharion hissed, with hope, with an expression that said, really? Yes, you will set the man on fire. I chuckled. Hey, maybe we can make a dad and his dragon day out of this. Hiss. This marks the end of part 11 of the story Game of Thrones, The Prideful One. Thank you for listening. Please like the video and hit the subscribe button to listen more. Hit the bell icon to get notified of all the new content uploaded to the channel ASAP.